Hello Linux fans, Rob here, and welcome to Linux Quest. As always, thank you for watching. Today we've got a look at Solus. This is a snapshot release, 2017.04.18.0 to be exact. And this is a big release. If Solus were not on that rolling release model, if it was on a 6-month or 9-month cycle, this would be a huge release. So we're going to jump over and take a look at some of what's going on with this particular snapshot, and then we'll come back and take a look at those changes in the actual Budgie desktop here. Now earlier I had the GNOME desktop version of Solus running, and it's a really nice experience. If you're a GNOME fan, that's now an option, so that's a big part of this release. Before we jump into all of that, though, I want to point out this wallpaper here from Carl Snyder. Absolutely love it. I'm a big fan of his artwork. Actually, you can see more over here on the Google Plus page. You know, he does a great job, and I use his wallpapers as I'm distro hopping. I'm just a big fan. He actually made Linux Quest a very nice wallpaper, which I use, but I every time I change distros, I seek out his work. So if you want to see more, I'll put a link here in the video notes. And I'm 99% sure that Carl just contributes his work to the Linux community, so we appreciate that. All right, so lots to see here again in Snapshot 2017.04.18.0. I'm going to kind of go through this as quickly as I can. We'll go over to, actually, let's see. We'll go to read more. So again, the big news here, you can now get Solus with the GNOME desktop, and included in that they've upgraded the GNOME stack to 3.24, even though for the Budgie side of things, which will be moving to Qt for Budgie Desktop 11, there's still going to be continued improvement, of course, on the GNOME stack side of things. So, lots of core improvements here. This snapshot features a multitude of new improvements and upgrades to almost every package that ships on any of the ISO snapshots. So lots going on here. One of the biggies, bulletproof boot management. So they're using now the Clear Boot Manager. And the way this is going to work is it will retain the previous working kernel and boot configurations, so that if during an update something gets hosed, you can fall back to the last known working kernel and bootloader configuration. So, you know, they're stepping out here and they're calling this bulletproof boot management. So a pretty bold statement, but I think this is going to go a long way towards people who would have these issues that would pop up to where, hey, I can't do this, and I can't access my kernel, and I can't access grub. That's catastrophic. So great to see that in place. We talked about the GNOME stack, so I'm going to skip over some of those details there. There are graphics stack and kernel enablement through shipping the latest Mesa 17.0.4, and I believe those are just bug fixes, so on and so forth. Linux driver management. So this is going to help with NVIDIA Optimus support, and it's going to pave the way towards supporting dynamic switchable graphics across all hardware vendors in the future. Kernel enablement, so lots going on there. Some additional MacBook Pro support, multimedia upgrades. So there's a new Pulse Audio. They're now shipping with FFmpeg 3.24.4, and that includes patches to VLC for FFmpeg 3 support, new filters, so on and so forth. Default applications here, so you now have Firefox 52.0.2, Rhythmbox 3.4.1, and Thunderbird 52.0.1. The default video player for Budgie and GNOME is now the GNOME MPV player, and I found that to be a really good experience. Depending on the resolution of the video you open up and everything, it scales really well. It doesn't open up into some weird window format that you then have to go in and drag and place just to make it fit the right way. So good job there. All right, changes to Budgie. So this snapshot features the new Budgie 10.3.1 release, and this is the last release of this type in the 10X series until it switches over to the Qt-based Budgie 11. So some bug fixes and things in place here. So far, it's been a very smooth experience. The big news, the big news in Budgie for a lot of you is a proper Alt tab. So this features a new Alt tab that's going to enable a faster, prettier, and more reliable window switching process. So this was done through the community, and this is kind of a big deal here. Basically, €500 was offered out to the community that's already involved with Solus, and then you had people working on that, and whichever work was or job was chosen and implemented here, they were awarded the €500. So I think that's an awesome way to do it. And again, it allows the community to be involved. It's kind of a win-win. There's also been some customization within the applets, and we're going to take a look at that. There's some new preferences for the clock up here. We'll certainly take a look there. And let's see what else. They've also added the ability to choose between left and right window buttons. So we have our controls here on the right, which is where my muscle memory says they need to be. But if you've come from a Mac, your muscle memory is telling you that those window controls need to be over here on the left, and now it's an option. There have been fixes to GTK 3.22. There's been some artwork improvements here so that you don't have redundant pieces of artwork. Other fixes improvements, so you've got fixes here to GNOME Twitch, resolved incorrect vertical alignment of the clock applet. A lot of these small details, like the placing of the applets and the spacing of the applets, the size of the applets, I'll talk about that more in just a moment. GNOME, so now you've got the option of GNOME, and it's the latest version of GNOME 3.24. With a very nice arc theme, and there's several really neat extensions that are already set up for you. The big one being Dash to Dock, because that allows you to go in and add additional, Dash to Dock allows you to go in and tweak this panel here on the left. You can move it to the bottom, and there are lots of other customizations that you can add in. The tweak tool is already in place to allow you to add additional extensions. And then they have some nice extensions, not only Dash to Dock, but there's one that was new to me called Impatience, and that enables faster animations for the GNOME shell. Now, whether that was just mental, and I told myself, hey, we've got this extension in place, now everything seems faster, to me it did feel faster. Also, they implemented top icons, which puts everything up top here where it should be, in my opinion, within the GNOME desktop. Also, improvements to the Mate desktop. So this takes it up to the latest version 1.18, and they include the updated Brisk menu. Now, that's a menu that just continues to improve. I'm actually, to be honest with you, surprised that we don't already see the Brisk menu in place on the Budgie desktop. Who knows? Maybe that will happen one day. I'd love to see it because it's an extremely nice menu, and here you'll see they've got several updates. You can enable a rollover behavior. You can add context menu, they've added the context menu for editing the menus. So nice to see continued updates there. Then they've got a long list here of packages that have been added and packages that have been removed. And then they go on to list all the contributors, lots of community involvement here. So to me, this is, again, a really big release, and I'm excited to see it. Now let's jump over and take a look at some things that I think are really standout features with Solus and the Budgie desktop. Now, one of the key standout features of the Budgie desktop is going to be the Raven menu. So we're going to step through that, but before we do, I don't want to forget the new applet settings. So if I were to left click, sometimes I confuse the right click and the left click. In this case, it's left click on the clock. I now have preferences. Under those preferences, you can show the date, you can show seconds, and you can toggle on or off the 24-hour time. You still have your options to go into the main time and date settings as well as calendar, but that new preferences has been added. And the other thing I want to point out again is they do an excellent job with these applets here. Although all of the icons, the artwork for the icons, are different, they manage to keep a consistent size and consistent spacing. And you can't say that about every desktop environment. There are times when, especially if you start switching themes, and I want to talk more about the themes here within Budgie, that those get so out of whack that if you are one of those people who you see it and you can't unsee it, it drives you nuts that all of a sudden you've got this giant applet icon here that's out of place with all of the other applets that are in place. And I haven't ever found that to be the case with Budgie. All right, so let's jump back over into another huge part of what makes Budgie Budgie, and that's the Raven menu. Now, I cannot help but point out, after looking at the latest version of Deepin, that they flattened their panel to the right, and now their panel looks more like Raven. So what do they say? What's the old saying that emulation is the greatest form of flattery? So I love the Raven menu, always have, and it's just something that continues to improve. All right, so first of all, when you first launch with one click, when you first launch Raven, you're going to launch into the applets section. And there you're going to see the calendar. You're going to see quick access to volume control, as well as output and input. And I love having this quick access here. Now at the bottom, you're going to have an icon that'll launch you right into the main settings control panel, lock out the system, shut down, log out, so on and so forth. Next up on this list is notifications. Now this is where I think Budgie also excels, is in the notification side of things. If we had a notification, you would see that this bell here is red, alerting you to the fact that you have a notification. I believe I put a screenshot in just to show you kind of what that looks like. Let's jump over to that. So yeah, here's a screenshot showing me that I had software updates available. So you would see a list. Let's say you ignored those notifications and they would kind of pile up here. You could click through those or you could clear those out. All right, so let's jump back in. So you'd have notifications. You could clear all notifications here. And then lastly, you've got the main settings icon. Now that takes you into a whole different area where you can control a lot of different things. And then you have two different categories here, general and panel. So I'm going to exit out of that, and I just want to talk about that a minute. I am thrilled to see that they've set that up separately, because really I don't want to see a lot of clutter here. You could set this Raven panel up to scroll like you would see in Deepin, but to me that adds too much. When you get too much clutter, it all kind of gets in your way. This is something that if you need it, it's there with one click, but it's not in your way. It also saves you time from having to go into some larger settings area, maybe in control panel or something like that, and allows you to quickly access what you need to access. Now, this is not the default icon set. This is not the default wallpaper. I'm going to quickly change that just to illustrate how nice this setup really is. And you can tell I've installed several icon sets. And by the way, they all apply the way they should, and I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So we're going to take this back up to Arc. So Arc Dark was the default, I do believe, there. And then Arc was the icon theme. And then they had the Breeze cursor in place, all of this by default. So you can see those have already changed over and applied. All right, I'm going to take that back to Papyrus. Now, I will say that the Sardi icon set, which is one of my absolute favorites, did not seem to apply well or show up well in the top panel here. And that was kind of disappointing. I'm not sure what's going on with that. They were very, very fuzzy. And that's the only icon set out of the multitude of icon sets that I installed that didn't apply as well as they should. But at any rate, one of the things that I'll focus in on here is the way they control the software center and what I think's going on with some of the limiting of the software, and kind of talk about that in just a minute. Let's move on here. So you can change theme settings. You can toggle on or off the desktop icons from here. You can adjust your fonts from here. And then here's the area where you could change the window controls from right to left. So the last section we have here is panel, and that's this panel. Or if you had two panels, you would have panel control here. So now I've got a panel at the top. If I wanted to add an additional panel, I could do that. So I could do that from here. And then you can control the position, top or bottom. You can also adjust the size. I bumped it up to 46 for the purposes of the video. You can toggle the shadow on or off, and in this case the shadow didn't really show up with the wallpaper, so there was really no need for it. Stylize regions, and then here's where you can add and change settings for all of your applets. And again, I just want to point out, I think Budgie does a better job with applets than practically every desktop out there. The KDE Plasma desktop's getting better. I've seen within the GNOME desktop and XFCE areas where you just get the applets so out of whack that it's just really frustrating. It's like once you see it, you can't unsee it. So here again, applet control. Overall, the Raven menu, fantastic, and just keeps getting better. All right, so let's move from that over to the application launcher. This is one area where, again, I'd love to see the Brisk menu come into place. This is a perfectly fine application launcher. It's just what I would prefer to see here is that in a long list, let me see here, let me go to a long list, system settings, I've got a scroll here. And yeah, okay, so I'm lazy and I don't like scrolling, but it would be nice to give the ability to either lengthen this area so that you're not scrolling as much, or maybe switch over to the Brisk menu, which gives you a little more control and some additional options here. But it does everything you need it to do. It's quick search, so on and so forth. And then let's face it too, with the ability to add your icons to the top panel here, I really don't use the application launcher that much because I've got quick access to everything I need here. You do have a right-click contextual menu, but it's very limited here. You can change the background, or you can get into settings. Now that was odd because I did choose, let's do that again, change background. Okay, now I haven't seen that before. That's very odd. If you'll notice, it launched to settings first before it went over into background. All I chose was background. So let's go back out one more time, and I'm going to choose settings. Okay, so that launched me right into settings. And then if you've ever run the GNOME desktop, this is where this kind of looks like what you would see within the GNOME desktop. But you've got access to everything you need here. Online accounts, keyboard setup, display. By the way, I've got an external monitor hooked up here, and this does what I need it to do in that I close my laptop lid, I boot in, I don't want to have to open the laptop lid in order to sign in and then switch over. This does exactly what it should do. It defaults to the external monitor even though the laptop lid is closed. That's the way I set it up, and that's the way it should stay, and that's the way it works. So and it's those things that if you have to deal with it every day, depending on how you have your system set up, you may not have easy access to that laptop if you've got it tucked away somewhere, just as an example. So all right, we'll close that out, and let's go in. We'll take a quick look here at the wallpapers, and we'll see again if that's going to launch. Yeah, see, that's strange. Settings first and then background. But again, if you've run the GNOME desktop, this will look familiar to you. Nice selection of wallpapers here. Lots of trees and flowers and birds and kittens and things there. So, you could choose also from pictures, and here's more of Carl's work, and then you could just go with basic colors. Now the theming, I wanted to talk about that. Let me go back here just a minute to settings. I want to talk about the theming because every theme that I have applied has applied extremely well. That's not the case with all desktops. sometimes applying a theme can be really wonky. And one of the areas that I think, and I don't have anything to back this up, it's just me thinking about it from the standpoint of the way Solus handles the software that's available in repositories. And there is another area that I think is pretty standout for the Solus operating system. Their software center is laid out in a logical manner. It's easy to understand. It's not the most beautiful software center I've ever seen. It doesn't have the most software. It's not going to be comparable to the Arch user repository as far as the amount of software available. It is getting better, and there are going to be new options with things like app images and Flatpaks. But it's laid out in a logical manner. You've got your main list of categories here for software. You've got a section here for updates where you could check updates. Oh, I love this. Yeah, that animation there. You can see what's installed. Then we have a third-party section. That's where you're going to find things like Flash, Google Chrome, so on and so forth, InSync, WPS Office. Very happy to see that there, as well as InSync. Quick search settings, and then you have settings here where you can automatically check for updates, enable checking for updates on a metered connection, update frequency. I changed that over from every hour to daily, and then the type of updates you wish to be notified about. So under updates, you have three sections. You have like security updates, core updates that are like necessary, and then I think you have optional application updates. I think those are your three categories, but someone will correct me there on that. So all of this is, again, laid out in an easy to understand and access manner. So let's talk more about the software, and I'm going to go over specifically to desktop software and theming, and I love this section because it's not always easy to install icon packs. Sometimes you have to go out to external links. So let's say if you were in GNOME Look, for example, or KDE Look. Sometimes you'll go to, say, an icon set, and you want to install that only to find, well, not so much with KDE anymore because of the way they're doing look and feel, but certainly within GNOME Look, sometimes you're going to find external links to those icons. So having a great list of icons and additional themes in place here is awesome. So you'll see here everything from high color icon theme, Mocha, Numix, really a high quality list. Now there's Sardi, one of my favorites, Papyrus, Solus artwork, Zuki theme, so on and so forth. So what you're going to find here is kind of a more recent high quality list of icons and themes. What I have found, with the exception of one of my favorites, which is Sardi, is that everything that's listed here in this desktop theming group works and applies just the way it should, which is awesome. So, kudos there, and that kind of gets me to the final part of this. So within this software center, you're, again, not going to find everything as if you had just launched into the Arch user repository and all of a sudden every piece of software on the planet is available to you. What you are going to find, though, is, I think, a quality list of software that's been tested and shown to work well with the Solus operating system. The last thing that the people behind Solus want to happen is that you have some piece of wayward software that hasn't been updated, hasn't been worked on, or it's just crappy code, and you install that, and then all of a sudden you start having a bad experience with the operating system because, let's face it, there are people who would blame that on the operating system, not on the software that they installed. Or they may not even be aware that what they installed is causing issues. So I think the theory behind let's test it, let's make sure it's high quality and works the way it should, and then we'll put it in the repository, I think that's a good approach. Now, someone like myself who is a distro hopper who sometimes wants to test 3 or 4 different packages, in an hour just to see what it is, what it does, is this something I need to do a video on? Sometimes that can lead me into an area within Solus where I go, boy, I wish there was an easier way to get this software. Now, all of that said, if you go into, say, the third-party section, that's growing. The list of software that's available is growing. I like the way they lay this out. You've got main categories, subcategories. One little nitpicky thing I'm going to talk about here, you've got a lot of blank space. I think you've got room for improvement. You could add larger icons, larger artwork or something here and fill this area up. That's just me visually saying, hey, I'm going to be nitpicky on that. But, you know, nothing's perfect. There's always room for improvement. And as long as you start to see that continued improvement in something, you know, that's awesome. So, but here you've got subcategories of games, for example, and it's that way through all of these main categories. I think what we're going to find over time is that with flat packs and app images and just continual growth within the software center, I think that the lack of software in the Solus repositories will be less and less of an issue for more and more people. So this is kind of going on long, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. I want to sum it up by saying every time I install Solus, especially with the Budgie desktop, I am asking myself, you know, why don't I use this as my daily driver? Well, for one thing, I'm just a habitual distro hopper. And, you know, and I love trying out new distros. But this one I think is going to stay on my main system for a lot longer this time. And the reason is it just runs so well. The desktop experience, again, the focus here is desktop user. You know, they're not out to say, hey, put this on a tablet or put this on your phone, you know, or anything like that. Run Solus on your refrigerator. This is core focused desktop experience. I'm a desktop user primarily, and this is going to stay on here for some time to come. The fonts are beautiful. It's smooth. It's fast. It's everything you need, I think, to have a really good desktop experience. Now, I know many of you who have watched my videos in the last, I think I started Linux Quest 8 months ago. I know you've heard me say this before about other distros. And granted, I may run this for 2 weeks and move on to something else. But right now, I am really, really thrilled to be using this as I think going to be my mainstay daily driver. And so that's what I'm going to stick to until you see me doing another video talking about my new daily driver. But that's just the way it is in the Linux world. So hope this helps. Hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.